Next is the gentleman from New York, Mr. Goldman.
Well, I agree with Mr. McDermott. Everybody in this room recognizes there's a right to self-defense, so I hope my colleague from California is permitted by his former colleagues to speak at the hearing on the California bill that is not a bill in this Congress. Mr. McDermott, I want to just clarify something you said. You said earlier on that in Chicago, the gun laws have not worked. I beg to differ. The Everytown gun law rankings that just came out, and I'm happy to introduce this, has Illinois, in terms of its gun law strength, at number 3. California's 1, Massachusetts 2, Illinois 3, my home state of New York 4. The problem with those states is that there is an iron pipeline where guns that are manufactured outside of those states are trafficked into those states. The ATF is the federal government agency that is charged, and I believe, Mr. Jackson, am I right, that the ATF is the only one with technology that can trace guns?
They're definitely the best at it.
Yeah, and so most local law enforcement send the guns to the ATF to trace so that they can figure out where they're coming from. That allows us to enforce federal laws against gun trafficking. Now, I want to raise a different point here because not only was Kash Patel recently confirmed to be the director of the FBI, he has never managed a local bakery, much less an institution of the size of the FBI. But then President Trump named him also to be the acting director of the ATF. Mr. Patel spoke at the inaugural summit of an organization called the Gun Owners of America, which says on its website that they advocate for abolishing the ATF. Mr. Jackson, briefly, can you just summarize what would happen if the ATF were abolished?
I mean, we would lose the ability to federally enforce rogue gun dealers, to focus on disrupting problematic iron pipelines, as you spoke of. There's multiple across the country. To prosecute gun traffickers. It would greatly handicap our background check system and our ability to identify and frankly deny dangerous sales of firearms. And most importantly, it will strip us of the ability to look out for emerging threats. We know that there are things like Glock switches and innovations that are happening every day that are making weapons more deadly.
Ghost guns as well. Now, that's not just a potential problem, that's a real problem because the president has issued an executive order to reevaluate every gun regulation that has been implemented by the Biden administration through Mr. Jackson and the excellent work and part of the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. Now, one of those rules is the engaged in the business of selling guns rule, which is clearly a target of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And it's pretty remarkable to me because that rule, which is often referred to as the zero tolerance policy, revokes federal firearm licenses for people who, one, willfully transfer a firearm to a prohibited person, someone who the law says is not allowed to own a gun. 2, fails to run a required background check. 3, falsify records. 4, fail to respond to a tracing request. Or 5, refuse to permit ATF to conduct an inspection in violation of the law. In other words, that regulation is designed solely to enforce the law. And yet, for some reason, that is a purported infringement on our Second Amendment rights. Ms. Mueller, I have a couple quick questions for you. Is there a Second Amendment right for a mentally ill person to own a firearm?
There isn't one that isn't.
Is there a Second Amendment right for, I just have a little time, for someone convicted of or with an outstanding order from domestic violence to own a gun?
Repeat the question, please.
Can someone who has committed domestic violence own a gun? Is there a Second Amendment right?
Gentleman's time has expired. You may answer the
sir.
question if you can. Thank you.
No, sir.
No, there's not. This is not a Second Amendment
Your
issue
time
that
has
we're
expired,
talking
sir. Thank you. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Nels.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Kiley, thank you for your questions. You think about California. Well, it's California. You figured that. You know, as an old sheriff in Fort Bend County, Texas, we love the great state of Texas.
That help us save billions of dollars every year, and I thank you for that work and thank your staff for that work. The GAO couldn't be more different than Trump and Elon Musk's DOGE. Trump and Musk want to rip away the vital services that millions of Americans depend on. He's doing it just to find money to give tax cuts to the richest people in this country and largest corporations in this country, many of whom pay a less effective tax rate than a lot of the teachers in my district. DOGE will save nothing for the American people while making everything worse for us, while trying to find room to give tax cuts to the richest people in this country. Shamefully, those cuts include cuts to our military veterans, including the nearly 32,000 veterans that I proudly represent. And I take this subject personally because I'm the son of a veteran. I come from an Air Force family. How my family's been in the Air Force so long, they were in it when it was the Army Air Corps. And so I take this very personally. Mr. Dodaro, VA healthcare is on the GAO's high-risk list. How have staffing challenges at the VA contributed to this?
And ask Ms. Farb to come up, but they've contributed to it very significantly. Jess?
I would say, you know, we talked about this a little bit earlier in terms of scheduling appointments for veterans, both in the VA facilities and in the community, providing treatments that are needed and timely care, which VA has had problems with in the past, as we all know. So not having the staff that they need to kind of continue on the path to making sure that veterans get timely access to
So
quality.
a staff capacity issue, not enough.
Yes. Well, not a right type. I mean, I'm very concerned about the mental health area. And they don't have enough behavioral mental health people, particularly for rural veterans.
100%.
And the suicide prevention areas is another area. You know, the last I checked, there were 17 veterans a day die by suicide. It's a national disgrace, in my opinion, that we're not better supporting these people, which is why I added it to the high-risk list. And so they need doctors, nurses, they need the proper care. And also the proper handoff if they go to the community care process as well. So it's an issue that we need to be very careful on how we handle and make sure it's done properly.
I 100% agree with you. I was actually about to ask you about the VA's need to hire more psychiatrists and psychologists, and I appreciate you bringing that up. Right. You know, last week I held a veterans town hall in my district at my local VA. There were a few hundred people that showed up. Folks came very confused, very angry, and very scared. They asked questions. I have some of them down. They asked, will I lose my benefits? Who staffs DOGE, and what are they doing with my personal medical information? Will budget cuts mean that I'll have longer wait times? Why is my health care being sacrificed to politics? These are the questions people ask me, my constituents, veterans ask me. Among the 18 inspectors general that Donald Trump illegally fired, which, by the way, Congress was supposed to be notified before an IG is fired like that. Maybe but 2 hours ago, Republicans in this committee took a vote to silence me because I said Donald Trump was engaging in grifting. But complete crickets when he breaks the law and completely circumvents Congress and doesn't tell us about the firing of 18 inspectors general. How will the firing of the inspector general of the VA make it harder to address the issues that my constituents, the veterans in my district raised?
I responded earlier that I thought it was unfortunate those IGs were fired. I think we lost a lot of institutional and expertise in that area. We've worked very closely with Mike Missile over the years and the other IGs. Now, they have a very talented group of people. They'll soldier on, and they'll continue to do the job, but it was unfortunate. And, you know, I had recommended to the Congress to make the change to require the 30-day notice and to give for cause, because the inspector generals do report to the Congress as well as to the head of the agency. It's a very unique responsibility, and Congress should have the opportunity to engage in a dialogue on that. I don't dispute the president's authority to fire them, but how it's done and follow the proper procedures, I believe, is important.
Thank you. The Orlando VA healthcare system already suffers from critical staffing shortages. I mean, the people there, who a large percentage of them are veterans themselves, are doing a great job. They're doing what they need to do, but they don't have the staff capacity necessary to be able to meet the demand, to be able to live up to our promise to people who put their lives on the line for the safety and security of this country. And that's something I take very seriously. It's something that a lot of my Republican colleagues used to take very seriously, but times change. Thank you so much, and I yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Gill from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing today. I'd like to start by addressing a few of the concerns that our colleagues have had on the other side of the aisle about the DOGE movement and Elon Musk in particular. And first, they're telling us that what DOGE and Elon Musk are doing by firing federal workers, many of whom aren't